Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Walking Between Shadows. We're happy to have you back. I'm your host, Ben Elliott, and my beautiful wife,
I'm Taryn.
Erin. So, before we get started, what is our strain of the week or strain of the episode, should I say?
This is Ooh La La from Cookies.
Ooh la la from Cookies.
Yes, 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 it
So,
is.
what's your impressions of Ooh la la from Cookies?
It's strong.
Is it
Yes, it is.
so? Like, what kind of high is it?
It's 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 kind of a laughing, a giggly,
Uh huh.
you know, relaxed,
Hmm.
hungry.
Yeah, I've noticed too. You've been talkative when you smoke that,
Yeah,
more so.
yeah. Which I am usually anyway with
Okay.
you, right?
Yeah, of course, of course. So Ooh La La is a hybrid weed strain made from a genetic cross between wedding cake and London pound cake. Bred by the real lemonade, Ooh La La is 20% THC or maybe a little bit higher, making this strain an ideal choice for a beginner and experienced cannabis user. Customers tell that Ooh La La effects make them feel relaxed and talkative and aroused. Medical marijuana patients often choose Ooh La La when dealing with symptoms associated with anxiety, depression, and bipolar disorder. The dominant terpene of this cannabis strain is caryophyllene. We've talked a lot about caryophyllene lately.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh La La features an aroma and flavor profile of cheese, apricot, and slightly chemical. So, does it have kind of a gassy taste?
Yes, it does. And I was going to say that it does have like a gassy aftertaste, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
absolutely. And cheese, I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the negatives that are associated with Ooh La La is it can make you a little bit dizzy.
Mm-hmm.
It can be negative on the effects for anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
It can give you a headache. So several patients have reported that it does leave them with a headache and a
And
little bit
anxious.
anxious.
Well,
Yeah.
that's not fun. I'm not feeling that way with it, but,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
it
Yeah.
takes, there's not many strains, though, with me that I get paranoid with.
Yeah. So I mean, like the dominant terpene here, caryophyllene, which cooks off at a lower temperature when you're burning it, gives it kind of a spicy or peppery taste. And caryophyllene anti-inflammatory, so it can help with people that are, with rheumatoid arthritis or any kind of pain.
Mhm.
It also, the other two more dominant terpenes in it are limonene, which gives it that kind of a citrus
Mhm.
note, and myrcene, which is, kind of an herbal note. It's going to be along the lines of bay leaf
Mhm.
almost.
Yes.
Um, but limonene and myrcene are the next two, and then it's dominated by caryophyllene.
Mhm.
Now, this particular sample of it we got from a dispensary in Belton, Missouri, and although it's not always our go-to, yeah. So Good Day Farms, if you want to try the cookies Ooh La La,
Mhm.
then check them out. Check out Good Day Farms at
Yeah.
Belton, Missouri.
Yeah. Pretty blue package.
Yeah, and that always matters.
Sure. Presentation's a lot.
Presentations, everything. All right, so moving to our case this week that we want to talk about, Ena and Rory Court out of Southwest Missouri.
Mhm.
And we're doing this because there is a strong connection to Tommy Lynn Sells again. So this is another case Tommy Lynn Sells
Yeah.
is associated with.
And very similar. When we get to talking about it, you'll see what I mean, and
Yeah. And, I've got to admit, I don't know a lot about this case. I've read a few little things. Um, there's some stuff on there like I went to a website called defrostingcoldcases.com and just read what they had put in there about remembering Ena and Willie Court. And it's real short. It's a one pager and it just kind of tells, their age and, the 30,000 foot view of the story. And then um, Diane Fanning, who wrote the book Through the Window about Tommy Lynn Sells, on her website, dianefanning.com, um, there's actually an article in there called No Justice for Ena and Rory Court. And it's really good. I take this case as it's out there, and you know, Ena and Rory were victims of murder, obviously,
sure.
but I get the feeling that not a lot of people believe. I'm going to turn this over to you, and Tell me a little more of the details. Again, I'm sorry, I did not do quite as much follow up reading about this as I have some other cases, so I don't know a lot about this case.
Well, this case has been this we're gonna go way back with this. I mean, we're going back to 1985.
Hmm.
So the summer, July 26th of 1985, and this case doesn't have it does have a lot of information, but it's repetitive
Hmm.
and it's very similar to Debbie and Ambria
Yeah.
and even the Dardine case, very much to the Dardine case, which I have found with Tommy Lynn Sells that a lot of his cases are similar in small towns or but this is not such a small town.
Well, now, mind you, this is a time period in Tommy Lynn Sells' life. He was living in the Springfield area,
Right.
and some
So,
other things are connected to where this happened. So,
right, there is. And we'll get to those. I want to cover, those as well. But this one, I just recently found out about this one.
hmm
And that's when we've been looking into Tommy Lynn Sells with Debbie and Ambria and the Dardine case. So we're going to go back to July of 1985. And first, I want to talk a little bit about Ena and Willie Cordt. So Ena was 28 years old. She was a very independent woman. She'd been divorced for about a year. She had two children, Peggy, who was 8 years old, and Willie, who was four at the time, just a week away um, from his birthday, almost 5 years old at the time of this incident.
so
And
Taryn, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but people have already heard me call him Rory
right,
and Willie.
right. So
His name, do you know his full name?
his name was Rory Wilhelm Hort, and he went by Willie.
Right.
So everyone called him Willie,
Okay. So
and
just everybody knows that Willie and Rory is the
same
same person.
person, same person.
Okay.
Ena was an independent woman. Like I said, she had worked for years at a hospital in Branson. I think it was Skaggs Hospital in Branson, Missouri, and as a maintenance worker. Um, she had been divorced, like I said, for about a year, and during that year, being a single mother, she was able to buy her own home. So after she left the hospital, Skaggs Hospital in Branson, she went to Forsyth and started working at a car wash. So that's really taken us back to a different time. You think about being able to afford to buy a home and be a single mother working at a car wash, which
Hmm.
is it's unheard of now.
Well, I mean, that's the price of inflation. So,
Right. So that's what she was doing at this time. And on the weekend of July 26th of 1985, July 26th would have been a Friday, and Peggy, who was 8 years old at the time, was with her father, getting ready to go to a wedding. So she wasn't home this weekend.
hmm
So Willie, he was getting ready to go to kindergarten. Um, his sister Peggy said that he had a huge personality. He would lay beside her, and she remembers him putting his finger through the tag of her shirt, and he loved to do that and follow her everywhere she went. He still sucked his thumb and loved to play with dump trucks. So he was very small at the time. Like I said, he was getting ready for his fifth birthday. On the night of July 26th, it would have been exactly 8 days before his fifth birthday. And the fair was in town in Forsyth, Missouri. So this was Taney County, Missouri. The fair was in town, and Ena decided to take Willie as a treat. Let's go to the fair. He's about big enough now to where he would really enjoy it.
hmm
So they go to the fair. And while they're there, they meet a carnival worker by the name of Tommy Lynn Sells. And
The first time I killed somebody, it was such a rush.
I don't know what he whispered into Ena's ear that night, or if maybe he gave Willie a little special treatment. And from what we've learned about Tommy Lynn Sells, he was a charmer. But whatever he said to her, she decided to invite Tommy Lynn over for a home cooked meal. I don't know if he put on the charm with her or what, but he must have. So later on that night, Tommy Lynn Sells goes to Ena's home and they eat dinner and they put Willie to bed. Tommy Lynn Sells claims that they had sex. Um, And after they had sex, he went to the bathroom to clean up and um, relieve himself. And when he came out of the bathroom, he saw Ena going through his backpack, and he had drugs in there. He said she was a drug addict, and he thought she was trying to steal from him. So he looks around and he finds a baseball bat that belonged to 4-year-old Willie, and he starts to brutally attack Ena until she is dead.
Mhm.
They're right there in the living room of her home.
Mhm.
Willie comes into the living room during the chaos and sees what Tommy Lynn Sells is doing to his mother. He then turns the bat on to 4-year-old Willie and beats him until he is dead, right there in the living room as well. And we know from studying Tommy Lynn Sells that that was his motto. You don't leave any witnesses alive.
Mhm.
Dead men can't talk,
Mhm.
is what he would say.
Yeah, and in some recent stuff we watched where he was interviewed, he said, I didn't want that child living with the same hell I lived with and not having parents, so he put them out of their misery. He assumed that this was a misery for kids to live without parents. So if a kid was there, that was another reason for him to kill the kid.
Right.
You also killed children.
Some got killed, yes.
Now, why would that happen?
I didn't want them to live through the pain I lived through.
And we've studied with Tommy Lynn Sells. He did have a bad childhood.
Mhm.
He was, his mother really didn't want him after the death of his twin sister. I believe they were only toddlers at the time.
Mhm.
Um, he lived with his aunt who did want him. And when his mother found out that the aunt wanted him, she refused to give custody to the aunt.
Mhm.
He would have had a much better life, probably a better chance. But he goes back to his mother, and she allows him to be sexually abused by a older man in the neighborhood
Mhm.
who kind of took him in and took care of him because his mom just kind of left,
Yeah.
you know. So that was just a little bit of what Tommy Lynn Sells went through, and I guess he believed that every child had no one else, that they would end up, in the hands of a predator like he did,
Mhm.
which we say that's what he thought. But I don't really know that he even had that kind of compassion in him to, and I say compassion, to do that to a child. I think he did it out of pure rage
Mhm.
and anger. So he was a monster.
Yeah.
Um, so days go by, and like I said, Peggy, Ena's 8-year-old, was out of town with her dad um, for a wedding. So she wasn't there, but Willie's babysitter starts calling, trying to get Ena to answer the phone. Willie hadn't showed up for several days. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, he wasn't there. So the babysitter ends up calling Ena's parents,
Mhm.
and that was Bob and Jill McIntosh. Um, the babysitter gets a hold of them, and they go over to Ena's home, and they walk in and find in the living room, in the split level home, their 4-year-old grandson brutally murdered, and their daughter, 28-year-old Ena, fell on the living room floor, the same room with their grandson. I cannot even imagine
Mhm.
the horror of finding my child and my grandchild. So an investigation has started, and by this time, Tommy Lynn Sells is already out of town. What brought Tommy Lynn Sells to that town even? And why would they even think that he would be a part of this, whatsoever?
Yeah.
Tommy Lynn Sells has been was in prison, was in state prison in Missouri for the year before, about a year before, 6 months before. He had gotten in trouble for theft and drug possession. When he was released from jail or prison, he was sent to a rehabilitation center, like I
Kind of
don't know
like
if
a
it's
halfway house
kind
or
of like a
something.
halfway house.
Yeah.
And there, from there, he got a job working for the carnival, which was something he enjoyed doing. We
Mhm.
know that he got his name, the Coast to Coast Killer, from going from town to town working these carnivals and finding victims.
Yeah.
It blows my mind that Ena would even invite him over, which makes me wonder if maybe he followed her. But that leads us to the conspiracies that have gone on with this murder over all these years. And we're looking at how many years is that? Like 39 years?
Mhm.
So 39 years. And we've learned with Debbie and Ambris and with the Dardenne case, those rumors go rampant,
Mhm.
especially in smaller towns,
Yeah, and the longer it goes, the wider they get.
the wider.
Yeah.
So from the beginning, they had no leads on this. I
Yeah.
mean, there was absolutely nothing. There was a man by the name of, I believe his last name was Smith. Cannot remember what his first name is. I'd have to look that up.
What was his role?
So when they were doing the investigation, they found his fingerprint or a fingerprint on the shower
Mhm.
of Ena's home in their bathroom. Come to find out, Bob McIntosh, which was Ena's father, had hired this man to come in and put up drywall in the
Yeah,
house.
like a handyman. Yeah.
Right. But he has carried you know, this cloud of suspicion over him for 39 years
Mhm.
because, there's nothing. Well, we know that in 2001 or in 2000, Tommy Lynn Sells was arrested and charged with the murder of Kayleen Harris, 13-year-old Kayleen Harris out of Del Rio, Texas. So after he was charged with that, I mean, he started confessing. The first thing he said was, I guess you want to know about the others. Okay, so people or these investigators and these detectives from all these towns with all these unsolved murders that started matching that kind of MO
Mhm.
of his confessions that he
Mhm.
was, telling them about, they started coming in by the handfuls, wanting to talk to Tommy
Yeah.
about, this murder and that murder. And there comes some this is when Tommy Lynn Sells, he tells them all this and he tells Diane Fanning these things and he gives his confession. And his first confession is that he met Ena at the fair and she invited him over for a home cooked meal. They ate. He called her stealing and, he did what he did to her and little Willie. But um when the investigator came down by the name of Don Swan in 2001, he came down to talk to Tommy Lynn Sells. And this was the lead investigator for Taney County,
Mhm.
which was Forsyth, where Ena and Willie were from. And he was convinced once he talked to Tommy Lynn Sells that he did this. But then it gets jumbled up because Tommy Lynn Sells starts talking to another PI and telling him that three men from Forsyth, three authorities,
Mhm.
the county clerk, the deputy, which at the time would was at the time that would have been Don Swan. He was the deputy at the time of the murder, and he was the lead investigator after when Tommy Lynn Sells after he had been arrested and
Mhm.
charged with Kayleen Harris's murder.
Mhm.
So Tommy Lynn Sells names the county clerk, the deputy, and the sheriff of Forsyth. Said they came to him during the fair and explained to him that Ena was having an affair with a judge of that town, of that county, and that she had to be killed to
Yeah.
keep quiet. So this was a contract killing, according to Tommy Lynn Sells, after his initial confession. It said that this PI was putting money on his commissary and feeding him, you know, things.
Mhm.
And he was just kind of going along with it. It seems like that was kind of something Tommy Lynn Sells did.
Mhm.
He would kind of, you know, branch off and make it bigger
Mhm.
when anybody else would get involved. And but this is the only murder. out of 70 possibly that he committed, that he actually said that there was anybody else involved.
Mhm.
He normally took full responsibility for doing this himself. He also put in there, he changed the story up a little bit that he and two other men from that worked at the carnival went with him over to Ena's house and they all gang raped her. And after he was done, he murdered her. He finished her off.
Yeah, he embellished a lot of stuff.
Right. So he said when he told that he was supposed to get paid $2,500 for the murder of Ena and Willie
Mhm.
by these authorities. And he stated to that he only got paid $1,000 to do this. And when he went to Don Swan and the sheriff, who his name was Chuck Keithley.
Mhm.
So he goes to them and he says, why you only gave me $1,000? You owe me you owe me $1,500 more. And Don Swan said, well, you got $1,000 piece of ass. So that's just part of what Tommy Lynn Sells did. He would change it up to make him look cool,
Mhm.
which it never did. It made him look like a monster
Right.
and just a sick pig. And you and I talked about this a little bit the other day. I have a hard time believing because at that time in 1985, no one knew that Tommy Lynn Sells was a serial killer
Right.
or that he even committed murder ever. He'd been charged with petty crimes and DUIs and theft and things like that, but he'd never been charged with murder. So I have a hard time believing that these authorities that supposedly have all this pull in town were going to go to this man who just stepped out of prison for theft,
Mhm.
not murder, nothing major, but steps out of prison for theft. He wasn't even from that area, really. I mean, close maybe, but not. He didn't. He didn't grow up there. They didn't know him.
Right.
So they're just going to walk up to some carny and say, "Hey, I've got this money, and I trust you to come take care of this murder for me," and not ever say a word. I don't know you. Just know you're in rehab, like a sober living right now, and you're working for the carnival.
Mhm.
And I'm going to pay you $2,500 to go take care of this problem for me. Where I could get a professional, but to get Tommy Lynn Sells.
Right. Right.
Details. We've talked about in last the couple last cases we did on Tommy Lynn Sells about how pinpointing him to details was something that you really have to go deep into and look. You have to look. I mean, overall, you're like, this doesn't match up at all. You know, with each case, it's like, well, that doesn't match and this doesn't match. But if you look a little bit deeper into it, you'll see that those little details make a huge difference.
Mhm.
And one of those details that Tommy Lynn Sells was able to provide to Don Swan is what Ena and Willie and he had to eat that night.
Mhm.
And going by their autopsy reports, he was spot on. The last thing they ate. So that's a detail. And just like with the Dardines and the watermelon plates and Debbie and Ambria with the soap dish, this could be another detail that he should not know.
Right. He could produce some very accurate minor details in
Very
these
much.
cases. Don Swan, the lead investigator in the Cordt double homicide, is convinced that Sells committed the crime. No charges were ever filed. The belief of the local authorities is that Sells can only be executed once, and Texas is more likely to carry through on that sentence than any other state in the union. That's what we talked about with the Dardines, with Debbie and Ambria, with
Right.
cases out of West Virginia, North Carolina, California. They could have potentially just not had the resources to bring him back, and Texas wasn't going to let him go anyway.
No. And you think about it, this poor little girl, the one that survived from uh, Kayleen Harris murder,
Hmm.
Crystal Searles, who was 10 years old at the time of the attack. She was attacked, but she lived, and she was able to identify Tommy Lynn Sells,
Hmm.
and they were able to convict him. She was still alive. She's still alive, and she should be able to live a life not being in fear.
Hmm.
And after what he did to Kayleen Harris, and was able to walk them through. That was a very fresh murder for him. Um, he he'd only done this for it was a couple days he was out, and I think 2 days. They had arrested him after 2 days
Mhm.
after Kayleen was murdered. So, you know, he those details, and we'll go over more again when we go over more cases of Tommy Lynn Sells, but that one detail has convinced a whole lot of people and authorities and Diane Fanning, who has did a lot of research and sat down with Tommy Lynn Sells at length and did these interviews, is convinced that Tommy Lynn Sells committed these murders. It's his MO.
Mhm.
It is definitely his MO. He used his favorite weapon, same one he used on the Dardines,
Mhm.
very personal and brutal. And I do not know if there's DNA that can be refurbished and test again or whatever they have to do to it, but there's a possibility that there could be DNA. It seems like in this town, with each election year, this is brought up that they want to solve this. I know that Peggy, Ena's daughter, wants this solved desperately. I mean, she wants justice.
Mhm.
And even if that comes in the form of Tommy Lynn Sells, who was um, convicted of the murder of Kayleen Harris and sentenced to death and is dead now. I mean, it was in 2014 when he was executed. So, I mean, just to put that at rest, where there's not these rumors and there's not these, you know, speculation,
Yeah.
it would be a form of justice, I believe.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right.
So that is the case of Ena and Willie Cordt from Forsyth, Missouri.
Forsyth, Taney County, Missouri.
Yes.
So that's a bordering county with Arkansas on the western side of the bottom of Missouri.
Mm,
And it really, I mean, as the crow flies, it's not far from Branson and Springfield, and you
right.
know, so I mean, there's a lot going on in that part of Missouri.
There has been a lot going on. I mean, there's the Springfield 3 down there. I know that's close to where Gypsy Rose Blanchard will be released
Mhm.
December the 28th.
Mhm.
And that's a big deal. That's a huge deal. So,
Mhm.
yeah, there is a lot that goes on around that area.
Yeah, look up Gypsy Rose Blanchard.
Yeah.
Mm. So that was great, dear. And I want to tell everybody we appreciate them watching and listening to us. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Hit the notification bell for updates.
Yes.
This has been Walking Between Shadows. Thank you.
Bye.